There are lots of advantages to managing your requirements directly in Jira. One of those advantages is that it allows you to report on your requirements in different ways for different purposes. In this video, I want to share a helpful strategy for building a tree-like requirement spec in Confluence that allows you to easily navigate your requirements stored in Jira. For this demo, I'm going to use an app called Elements Publish. Publish is a third-party app from the Marketplace that allows us to use recipes for publishing and synchronizing Jira issues into Confluence. For this demo, we can see I've created several recipes, one for each type of item that I might publish to my requirement spec. For example, feature sets with features and requirements and design constraints and etc. And if we were to drill into the requirement recipe and look at the content, as an example, we will see a templated Confluence page that will publish and synchronize my fields from Jira for this single requirement entity. So this will create a single page representing a single issue from Jira, and it'll synchronize the fields from Jira, and it can even insert macros for displaying linked issues to this requirement. And so in this way, I can show the test scenarios that are linked for my requirement, any related concerns or design constraints, and even a revision history of the backlog items that created and revised this requirement over time. And you can create a different recipe for each different issue type, or multiple recipes for issue types, so that you can create different views of your Jira issues inside Confluence. So let's look at an example now. Here I have a draft user requirement that is part of my requirement spec, and this is a regular issue inside of Jira. I have a summary, description, some metadata, and importantly, I have links to other Jira issues. I have a link to the backlog item that created it, a link to the concerns and constraints that it implements, a link to the feature that it is related to, and links to the Gherkin test scenarios that function as functional requirements for this user requirement. And of course, if I were not using behavior-driven development, I would have traditional functional requirements linked to this using an upstream-downstream relationship. And what I want to demonstrate is using the Publish app, I can publish this requirement into Confluence. It's going to display a list of recipes available to this requirement type. I've only created one recipe for this requirement type. Press Next. I'm going to tell it where I want this page that it creates to be published to. So I can specify the Confluence space, what the parent page should be, and what the title of this new page should be. And then I can publish the page. And right now it is building out a new Confluence page based on the recipe that I have configured inside the Publish app. And if we look at this, I now have a new page based on that recipe. We can see that all of the data from Jira is dynamically populated into this page. So all of this data is the data from Jira, and even the linkages that we saw inside Jira are reflected on this Confluence page. Here are my test scenarios, the related concern, the related design constraint, and my revision history. The key advantage to publishing a requirement spec like this is that Confluence is much more browsable and navigatable than Jira. Using this requirement that we just published as an example, in addition to seeing all the linkages reported on directly in this page, we can also see where this requirement exists in the hierarchy of my overall specification. I can see the other user requirements that are parallel to this requirement, and I can see where this exists in the tree of features and feature sets of my application. If that's how you happen to organize your requirement spec, you can organize it any way you need to. But the idea here is that I can now browse to sibling requirements very easily. I can browse across features and see what's contained inside each feature, or even inside each feature set. And so what's convenient about using an app like Publish is that it will automatically keep Jira and Confluence synchronized, so you only need to publish each page once and the app will maintain the page thereafter. Using this user requirement as an example, if I go back to Jira and edit my requirement, let's go edited for a demo, just as an example, save this, go back to my Confluence page and refresh the page, my update is already there. So I don't need to continuously update my Confluence spec as I'm making changes in Jira. Confluence will stay up to date automatically through the Publish app. So likewise, if I now route this for approval, and then refresh my page, we can see that the status has updated as well. Now there's one key disadvantage to maintaining a requirement spec like this in Confluence, and that it is extremely difficult to lock a tree of pages and route them for approval inside Confluence. Looking at this requirement spec, if I wanted to lock this requirement spec at the time of release and route it for approval, I would have to snapshot each page individually and route each page for approval individually, which is completely unsustainable. But there is an easy workaround for that problem. Because your requirements are actually stored in Jira, Jira is the true data source, and Confluence is just a view into that data source, you can create other views of the same requirements inside Confluence that you can route for approval and maintain those views in parallel with this browsable requirement specification. So for example, I might maintain this browsable tree-like requirement spec as a living document inside Confluence for the team to use to maintain our application, and then at the same time, in parallel, maintain release-based snapshots of my requirement spec that exist on a single Confluence page. So here's a view of my user requirements, but instead of in a tree of pages, all of my user requirements are listed in a traditional URS format on a single Confluence page, so that now this Confluence page can be snapshotted and routed for approval at the time of release. And this is something I would maintain in parallel with the browsable requirement spec. And doing this is not a lot of extra work because you're not maintaining two requirement specs. You're maintaining one requirement specification in Jira, and you're creating multiple views of that same requirement spec inside Confluence, different views for different purposes. All right, that was just a quick demo of building a tree-like requirement spec inside Confluence that stays synchronized with your requirement data stored in Jira. And for a non-GXP application, this sort of a living document view of your requirement data might be the only view you maintain. And for other applications that might be GXP related or have regulatory clearances, you can supplement this living document with release-based snapshots of that same requirement data. I hope you found this video helpful. If you would like to see more, go to www.agile-innovations.tech. Thanks for watching.